snow lands on top. That was worth the wait. Today we're talking about the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, or as I like to call it, the Ballad of President Snow, being a tedious young man who's so extremely self-absorbed and self-obsessed that he has enough monologues to parallel Hamlet and David from Giovanni's Room. This was the long-awaited prequel to The Hunger Games, and this is my book and movie spoiler-free review, just in case you still haven't figured out if you want to read the book or watch the movie or not. I'll be honest, I'll admit right off the bat, I had a big Hunger Games phase. I'm a big Hunger Games girly. I am talking about wear your hair in a braid like Katniss every day, buy a bow and arrow. Yeah, maybe I'm still not completely out of that phase since a couple years ago I attended a knife throwing event, which I thought was really fun. So the point was, I would say that there were two main points. The first point was to tell us all about the history of the Hunger Games, give us some more insight about how this brutal game came about, and also the second thing, probably to make us feel just a little bit more empathy for President Snow, that ruthless president. In that regard, I would say the book was halfway successful. It gave us the context, but really did nothing for our overall feelings towards Snow. I mean, in general, I just don't think prequels and sequels work well for authors, because if you need an entire other book to tie up loose ends, maybe you had too many loose ends in the first place. Maybe you didn't do enough world building. Or maybe part of the appeal, like in the case of the Testaments and The Handmaid's Tale, was in the open-endedness of it all. In case you haven't heard, the prequel is supposed to be like our gateway into further understanding into the Hunger Games, because it's supposed to give us more insight into how those brutal games came about and to the history and the geography of Panem, how those certain small traditions, like how every district has its own mentor, came about, how it came that patrons can buy supplies for the tribute that they like and send it off into the arena, how it all became so televised. I would say that the thing that the book did well, The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, was that it struck the perfect balance between telling us just enough to not feel too much like we're doing all the work. It gave us just enough hints to figure things out, but it also didn't feel quite too lectury. And I think Collins was very well aware that most readers who read The Hunger Games either read them in 2012 or 2015 or sometime right after or before or in between. And honestly, I think that it's a really good thing that there was a recap, like the prequel, of all the things that happened, because you really don't need to read all of the 3 books again. Phew. So yeah, it just reminds us a little bit about the geography of the Panem. I would say in just a little bit more detail about the districts, because it's kind of like the US, if you remember. I mean, it's a dystopia. You know, what's to say that the US isn't a dystopia too, like any other country now? It reminds us that the Hunger Games were there in the first place to punish the rebels who fought against the capital. Still some unanswered questions there. Why, when, by whom was this war started? Really unclear, still not explored, still not answered. But it did give us just enough to understand why the punishment was as harsh as it was. I mean, it really tells us that this was a difficult time not only for the rebels in the districts, but in the capital. So it's not that the district's people resent the capital solely for the Hunger Games. No, rather it's because that there is a long-standing history of mutual hatred, and it reminds us once again that the ultimate winner in all wars is just death and hatred and the resentment that it brings. Because we see that, well, Coriolanus and his sister, their father died, the previous president, he died by the hands of the rebels. Their mother died in childbirth. They were raised by their grandma, and of course they were really short on funds, since, well, everybody who could earn money died, so they're simply living out without any source of income. So they're really struggling. They go hungry for a long time, but they're still a lot more privileged than many other people in the district. And even from this, it might seem like, oh, well, if the whole book is the way that this girl is telling us, it just feels like a lecture. But I would say that the reason that the book manages to strike the balance and the way that it doesn't feel like a lecture is because it does it authentically. So the reason for that is because it actually is a lecture. It feels very much like Like an Oxford tutorial, of course, minus the whole, like, instead of lab rats, we have humans type thing. An Oxford tutorial is famous for being like the sort of lecture that isn't really a lecture, in that you and the professor are kind of like on equal ground. So the professor asks you questions and you reply, and the learning takes place through discussion rather than the more traditional way of writing things down per se. That's exactly what's going on here. The students, Coriolanus, and us, the reader, as we get pulled into this, are essentially students at a university, at a lecture, and we're being told all those things through being asked, like, oh, why do you think we have the Hunger Games? Do you think it's a fair punishment? Or, like, how can we make this less of a punishment and more of a source of income? So, in short, if you want to find out more about the Hunger Game, but you don't want it to be like a tedious, laborious task, like a sort of, oh, let's close all those gaps we had questions about 10 years ago type thing, I would say that the book does that pretty well. The issue was more the pacing and the structure. Perhaps this is one of those rare instances when the movie did something better than the book, because the movie gave us far less insight into Coriolanus, which I honestly think is kind of a good thing because, sorry, the guy is a bore. Hear me out. The book is quite dense. The first part, the Hunger Games part, is fascinating. We can really get behind it. It's less about Coriolanus and his wishes to serve the capital, and more about him as a person with average struggles, was trying to deal with poverty and surviving, and also his tribute Lucy Gray and protecting her, and then like trying to fight his feelings for her. The pacing is great. Susanne Collins can write action very well. The whole thing plays out like a movie. In fact, watching the movie feels like the ultimate replay because the actors, I feel, were cast very, very well. Coriolanus was beginning to feel very much like a guy that we could get behind, which I think was the point. I mean, we could really empathize with him. Like, yeah, sure, he was condescending and snooty, but overall, he just felt like a guy who was doing his best to really try and fight the way he was raised, to be a better version. I don't know. He wasn't the best person, but he wasn't trying to be the best person. He was complex, he was morally gray, he was nuanced. He was the kind of character we could talk about and discuss and try and justify his actions. He was a good character. He wasn't a good character. He was a well-written character, let's say. The kind of guy who you could say, well, maybe, just maybe, his heart is in the right place. Like the kind of character we read about who are mass murderers, but we're still fine because they're nuanced and complex. In short, a well-written character. So, in short, the book managed, because it is very much both character and plot based in the first half, to hold our interest for the first 300 or so pages. Oh god, the next part though. Okay, I don't know what you expect of this book. Probably to hear about, well, what the tribute did, what Snow was like, and how he became president. I know that's what I was expecting. That's 2/3 of the way there. I honestly thought we'd get some sort of juicy socio-political, historical insight into how you become president, who the people in control really are, things like that around the capital. No, we don't really get to hear quite about that. Instead, after the Hunger Games part, we kind of get a character arc where Coriolanus makes a series of bad decisions. Which, alright, fair enough. I am always an advocate for characters with their rights and their wrongs. I really don't care that his actions hurt a lot of people. I mean, it's to be expected. It's a ruthless, terrible dystopia world. Okay, whatever. But I also probably don't care because we don't feel remotely any sort of sympathy or empathy towards any other characters beyond like the basic human decency and respect. I said what I said, and the reason for that is because I honestly don't think that they're very well developed, except for Coriolanus, and even Lucy Gray. I don't think he truly understands her, and I don't think he truly understands anyone else because he never bothers with anyone but himself. And so I think the main issue with that one was that this is what we're told about a character, for example. XYZ grew up here. XYZ has a mother who likes ABC. XYZ has a father who's never there. XYZ is a nice person because he shows just a little bit more empathy. He treats the people from the districts just a little bit better than everybody else. XYZ is nice to Coriolanus because XYZ is a nice person. Coriolanus is kind of an a-hole towards XYZ because it's Coriolanus. They slowly start to warm towards each other. But XYZ doesn't quite fit Coriolanus' plan, so Coriolanus gets rid of him. Done. Where in this description did we start to care about XYZ beyond the fact that he's a nice person? So yeah, in short, that's the latter part of the novel that I had to consult my notes to get through. Because the ultimate question is, do you finish the novel or does the novel finish you? Because it just goes so downhill after the first part. It was just such an immense disappointment, because really the book was going towards a firm 5 stars, a firm 4 stars maybe, a firm 4 stars, maybe a 5 stars, and then bam, we have the second half, bam wham, now it's mid. It's officially mid. I cannot give it anything more than 3 stars. Because it's so dreary. My word, it's actually so dreary. Because Coriolanus is like, think The Catcher in the Rye. Incessant whining. But where in The Catcher in the Rye, the whole point is that he's an adolescent and he's growing up and he's a character we can all relate to, and like we feel that yeah, he's just growing up, he's having a difficult time. This man is constant, incessant whining about the politics of the capital, which, by the way, we never really get to like understand how he was conditioned to be this way. All we understand is that, like, yeah, his father was the president, he held an important role. Of course, he wants to restore the former glory of the dynasty, but it feels very much like some political figures, not naming any names, the kind of political groups who just spew hatred all day, who go like, oh, we want to make this thing great again. Okay, I'm really not pointing towards anyone. This is a phrase that Snow uses, not me. He uses that phrase. Oh, he paraphrases it, but he goes like, oh, the capital used to be so great before all those district people ruined it. Let's restore it by bashing the district people. I mean, really, it just, oh my god. It's just like, how much of that can you read before it all starts to get the same? In the first half of the book, you understand it. And you see that he's struggling towards his conditioning. He's trying to become a better person, and there's a plot. The second half of the story, there's far less of a plot. It's just his incessant monologues after monologue, and him kind of trying to be like, well, yes, I want to be a better person, but they're being rebels. Ooh, being a rebel is bad. It's up to me to fix it. It's up to me to make the capital great again. I don't know, like, he genuinely keeps saying that. And genuinely, how much of that can you read before you start to get bored? Well, my answer is you can skim read the final 200 pages of the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes and then close the book and then be happy that it's over. Because honestly, I don't think it's just me when I say that the second half was a disappointment. Alas, there's supposed to be a love story between Lucy Gray and Coriolanus, and that's supposed to be one of the central plots. That's supposed to be the focus of the second half. And the reason I say that there isn't a plot is because it doesn't work out. Really, I think that there's a lack of chemistry. Lucy Gray has banter. Lucy Gray is funny, Lucy Gray is witty. Coriolanus has the character of a sponge who incessantly whines and laps up all the propaganda the capital spews his way. So really, their romance is just like a matter of time before he gets bored of her, and it's very obvious from the onset. And proof of that is the fact that I was watching the movie with my dad, and I read the book and he didn't, and the moment he saw them together, he was like, oh, I don't think this is gonna last. And I was thinking, yeah, I also don't think this is gonna last. Like, no spoilers as to what happens, but it isn't exactly a healthy relationship. There's so much complaining about Lucy Gray as well, which I don't think is good, because Lucy Gray isn't that well developed either. She's kind of like, it feels like we're still stuck a little bit in 2012, because she's like she's not like other girls type persona, like, oh, everybody's really just depressed because of course they're poor and they don't have any food and they're starving in the districts. And Lucy Gray is not like that, because you know what, she's kind of like a traveling artist, let's say. So she has those bright colored skirts and music, and she's singing and she's dancing. So yeah, she has a personality. Ooh, she's not like other girls. It does still feel a bit like we're stuck somewhere there. So yeah, it's all about pining after her. There's not much development beyond that. And for Coriolanus, the whole problem is like, oh, she's so pretty. Oh, she's so beautiful. Oh, I'm obsessed with her. And then it's like, oh, well, she's so beautiful and everyone recognizes that. Oh, she's kind of a loose woman. I don't want to hang around her. I'm gonna try and reform her. So not only is the guy a total capital fan, but he's also kind of really jealous. And honestly, even if you're fine with all the capital propaganda, it just gets a little bit boring when he keeps being jealous about a girl we don't really care about. Like, yeah, of course she's endearing, she grows on us because she's nice. But I think that's the problem with many of the characters we're supposed to really feel empathy for. They're just nice. I mean, you can't even, maybe I'm heartless, but I can't even cry for any of them when they get hurt because, yeah, like, they're just nice. There isn't much to them beyond that. The plot, in short, is not planned to the same extent that the first part is. The pacing is off, and that throws the structure off. So, surprisingly, with all that being said, I think the movie actually ends up being in quite a few ways better than the book. The casting is very nice. It matches what I pictured the characters to be like, at least. It's it's very much has the setting of the Hunger Games down, I think, with the whole with the tunnels and the drones. I think it's very realistic, perhaps more so than even the original Hunger Games movie series was than the book. And there are really only marginal differences between the book and the movie. Of course, they ignore some details that make sense and that give us more insight to Coriolanus' character. But like I say, because Coriolanus is not a nice character, he's really tedious. I think that it's ultimately a good decision on the director's part to cut some of that out. So, yeah, in general, I think Coriolanus is much more of a gray character in the movies. We can really kind of have mixed opinions on him based on the movies, but based on the books, I think we can all agree that the first half of the books is more like, oh, I kind of starting to like this guy, and the second half is just like, oh my god, like, I don't judge him for some of the decisions he made. I mean, I do, but I understand. But also, if he says one more word, I'm going to single-handedly choke him. Like, that kind of thing. So, in general, I think it's worth it for those who want a little bit more insight. I don't regret reading the book. I do regret that the second half of it was just not that good. So, I hope this review gives you at least just a little bit more understanding about why the book is the way that it is and whether it matches your desires, because I'm sure we all have our own kind of goals and plans about revisiting a series as important to our childhood or teenagehood perhaps as the Hunger Games was. Because I am a little bit swollen from my wisdom teeth removal, so that's why I'm talking like this and looking like this. Thank you so much for watching.